Good morning. My name is Sara Forrest. It's an honor to be your worship associate this morning. One of the last things my grandmother said before she passed away was actually a question. She asked her daughter, my mother, "Did I do enough?" I don't know that my grandmother was someone who really knew what she meant to the people in her life. She was a reserved person and quiet in her way, and she was not someone who commanded the spotlight. But she was someone who commanded a great deal of respect and deference from the people who came into her circle. I remember once going to church with her, and after the service, she was approached by a tall young man. He must have been over 6 feet tall, and even though he had to bend to speak to her at 4 feet 11, I could see and I was struck by the look of respect, admiration, and tenderness that he clearly felt for her. It turned out she'd known him since he was little and had taught him for years in Sunday school, and always found special ways to keep up with him along his journey. There was one value that was always close to my grandmother's heart, and that was the value of service. For her, that meant service to her family, to neighbors, and very importantly, to her church community. For 50 years, she served in choir and by teaching Sunday school. Those were some of her official activities, but just like in our own church, she was part of countless gatherings, recitals, rites of passage, congregant care, and all the varied tasks and things that can make a church a home. And she approached every one of these roles seriously, thoroughly, and without fanfare. And by serious, I don't mean to say that she was humorless, because she did have a very quick and dry sense of humor that would catch anyone off guard. But I mean more that she understood even small acts of service were important, and she cared that they were done well. And so there she was, anchored by her faith, day after day, year after year, serving her community with love. We held her funeral there in her beloved church. I sat in the front pew with my mother and my aunt, and the service opened with a song my grandmother herself had chosen for the occasion, "His Eye is on the Sparrow," a hymn that reassures us that even the smallest among us will be looked after and attended to by God's love. That morning, the entire sanctuary was full of people who were touched by her life, full of people she cared for and loved. At the end of his eulogy, the pastor looked out across the pews and asked that anyone who had been taught by her in Sunday school please stand up. I still remember the rush of emotion when just about half the people there stood up and held a moment of silent gratitude for her. That is a memory I will cherish always. After the service, we were flooded by the people who came and told us stories, many which we'd never heard before. There was a neighbor girl, now grown up, who told us my grandmother would go to her parent-teacher conferences at school because her own parents couldn't. There were stories of gifts given, time spent, and lifelong friendships. On that day of sadness, there was something beautiful in how we were all connected through this remarkable person. And it seems silly to say, but I kept thinking, I wish she was here to see this. Maybe she would have had some clarity on that question. Did I do enough? My grandmother's name was Myra Faye Stillwell. Some of you may know that my daughter is Myra Faye Forrest. And so the thread of love continues into this beloved community.
Our reading today is Ask Me by William Stafford. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest help or love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there and hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. "15 years ago or so, I ran into a friend of mine who was working at New Seasons. Jamie and I had been friends in college, and together we went on a study abroad program to Great Britain with about 25 students from Lewis and Clark. I have fond, but not particularly specific memories of Jamie, and so I was absolutely shocked when, after just a moment or two of chit-chat, he said, 'I was telling my wife just the other day how you saved my life.' Huh? I had no memory of this at all, and you would think that that was something that I would remember. But yes, as he explained, I did remember that the four of us had gone to see UB40 in concert in London. And as we're all walking out of the venue, and Jamie is kind of walking into the street, and I grabbed his coat and kept him from walking into the path of a double-decker bus. This was not anything heroic. I just noticed something that he hadn't. But to Jamie, that moment cemented something between the two of us, and I occupied a much larger part of his story than I otherwise would. Life is like that. Like Taylor Swift writes and Bren sang today. Isn't it just so pretty to think that all along there was some invisible string tying you to me? Or in the words of William Stafford, others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. We are all tied in a single garment of destiny, to paraphrase MLK Jr. We are all connected in so many ways to people we know and people we've never met. From the most profound relationships of our lives to people whose names we may never know, we affect one another. A story that I heard last night, Dave and Joan were chatting with their neighbor one day, and Dave, who felt like he had very little family, realized that he and Joan shared a great-grandfather. Or, I'm sorry, not Joan. He and his neighbor shared a great-grandfather. I'm going to invite you into a really short exercise right now. I'm going to invite you, if you're willing, to close your eyes and to imagine a negative interaction that you've had in the last day or two. It could be a fight with your partner or getting cut off in traffic. Just think for a moment about a negative interaction you've had. What did it feel like? Is it gone now until I asked you to remember it? Or is it hanging around like a knot in your stomach? Okay, now we're going to get rid of that. I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in and then breathe out and let that go. Shake a little if you need to. Now I'm going to invite you to think about a positive interaction you've had in the last few days. Maybe something as simple as a friend smiling at you at church. A warm conversation. A friendly cashier at the grocery store. And I want you to sit in that feeling for a moment. How does a positive interaction make you feel? And here's another question. Did you tell the person or otherwise share with them the effect their positive interaction had on you? I'm going to invite you to open your eyes. Yesterday, I had the deep privilege of officiating Dave Hebert's memorial service. Of all of the things that I do here, that is one of the things that feels the most important. And it's something I love because I get to hear the best stories about people that we rarely hear if we haven't known somebody for 50 years. I learned the coolest things doing memorial services. These next 3 people that I'm talking about are all members of our congregation or were members of our congregation. I learned that Ed Hansen, through his work with Indiana Fish and Wildlife, helped save 700,000 acres of land with a focus on wetlands through his running of the program that raised money through the sale of special fish and wildlife license plates. I learned that Jim King helped design the camera that took the first pictures of the moon on the first moon landing. I learned that Margie McHugh developed curriculum and resources to prevent domestic violence, including a children's puppet show called No Punching Judy. And sometimes, even if you do know someone for 35 years, you find out things at their memorial service that you didn't know. My Aunt Arnell, who was the daughter of my great-grandmother, who married my great-grandfather, she was his second wife. So Arnell and I technically weren't related, but we were related. Arnell had gotten polio as an older teenager, around 18 or 19, and she used a wheelchair and had a profound facial droop, and so she was always having to kind of push up her lip. And she was just a neat woman. But I did not know until her memorial service that she, before the Americans with Disabilities Act, she was one of the people that convinced Nordstrom's and Macy's to put in handicapped accessible fitting rooms. She was the administrator for the hospital in McMinnville, Oregon. She had a professional job. She had to wear professional clothing. And how could, before the era of the internet, how could she try on those clothes if she couldn't get into the fitting room? You learn amazing things. Every one of us does amazing things throughout our lives. Some of those things are big and some of those things are small. Not everything makes it into the memorial service. But it does in the way we talk about people. Kate Grant, who had 5 people say she was their best friend. Dave Hebert, who was described as so warm and kind and funny. And some of us aren't as nice all the time. Sometimes we are just big old cranky butts, over and over and over again. But something else Dave Hebert said to me resonated. He said, and he is far from the first one to say this, we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. We can choose how much suffering we let into the world. No one is asking you not to suffer when something horrific happens. But maybe, with the little stuff, we can choose how much suffering we want to face, how we tell our story. Years ago, a friend told me this story. She said that when she and her sister were teenagers, they did the grocery shopping for the family because their mom was really busy with work. She and her sister would get money and walk to the grocery store and bring home what her mom asked for. And my friend felt really empowered by this. She felt like her mom trusted her, like She knew she was responsible, and she felt really good about that. But when she and her sister finally talked about it, she realized that her sister felt profoundly uncared for, that she felt neglected, that her mom didn't do something basic that other parents did, and that they had to pick up the slack. Both of these responses are perfectly reasonable. Neither one is right or wrong, but one kid ended up with a much happier relationship with her mom. And both sisters finally understood each other a lot more when they finally had that conversation. One of the things that happened to me when I was gone was realizing all of the invisible strings that tie us together as minister and congregation. Mostly, I did a good job of getting away and taking a mental break. I was so grateful not to get any texts about the building for 4 months. But that doesn't mean that I didn't think about all of you. As I mentioned last week, I took nearly the whole 4 months to read all of your cards, just savoring them and thinking about you all. I thought about you and how you're all doing with the horrors this administration is putting on the country. And I confess that when I was in Alabama on my civil rights tour and we stopped at a Buc-ee's, I took a photo of a Roll Tide Alabama t-shirt and sent it to Floyd and Sally. There are so many strings connecting us. Last month was the 10th anniversary of this congregation calling me to be your minister. We've been doing this 10 years, folks. And I can't make any promises because it's conceivable that you might need something different in a minister at some point, or something will happen in my life that means I need to do something else. But a really nice conclusion that I really confirmed on my sabbatical is that you all are my people. I love my job and I love you. And if all goes well, I would like to be your minister for another 10 or so years and retire from here. The CDC, well, last year when we had a functional CDC, talks about the health epidemic of loneliness and the importance of social connections. The takeaway points from its front page article on the website are that staying connected to others creates feelings of belonging and being loved, cared for, and valued. That social connections are important to our mental and physical health. That being connected to others helps protect against serious illness and disease. And that people with stronger social bonds are more likely to live longer, healthier lives. It is one of the reasons that church is so important, in my opinion, because church is one of the best places for intergenerational community that we have. In his article, The Anti-Social Century, published in the February 2025 issue of The Atlantic magazine, Derek Thompson writes that while we may be falsely conflating loneliness with solitude, it is definitely true that we are spending more time alone these days, or with just our immediate families. And while we may indeed have more online connections, which are especially important for folks in minority communities, whether that's folks with a particular medical condition or lonely queer folks in rural areas, online connections are real. However, what the article states is that we've lost the moderating middle. We have our tribe, Yankees fans, or parents of autistic kids, or members of a gay chorus. And we have our closest friends and family. But what we seem to be missing, according to Thompson, is the middle ring of familiar but not intimate relationships with people who live around us, which Mark Dunkelman from Brown University calls the village. These are your neighbors, the people in your town, he said. We used to know them well, and now we don't. The middle ring is the key to social cohesion, Dunkelman said. Families teach us love, and tribes teach us loyalty. The village teaches us tolerance. Imagine that a local parent disagrees with you about affirmative action at a PTA meeting. Online, you might write him off as a political opponent who deserves your scorn. But in a school gym full of neighbors, you bite your tongue. And as this year rolls on, you discover that your daughters are in dance class. And as you wait for pickup, you swap stories about caring for aging relatives. Although your differences don't disappear, they're folded into a peaceful coexistence. And when the two of you sign up for a committee to draft a diversity statement for your school, you find that you can accommodate each other's opposing views a little better. It's politically moderating to meet thoughtful people in the real world who disagree with you. We are losing some of the invisible strings that tie us to a variety of people, that connect us with people who aren't necessarily our people, the ones who teach us tolerance versus love or loyalty. You've heard me talk before about the lack of a common media news that attempted to be fair and unbiased, rather than news that reinforces our own political beliefs, seems to be one of the reasons that we are where we are in this moment politically. We are deeply divided in a way that we haven't been before, where the president doesn't even pretend to be the president for everyone, but instead literally attempts to jail people who don't agree with him. We have to hold strong to democracy. As a friend of mine stated recently, so much is going wrong right now, it's a fire hose, but if we manage to protect democracy, we'll have a fighting chance to restore some of the individual rights we're losing. And if we lose democracy, we won't. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from a Birmingham jail, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all of us indirectly. This applies to big questions of justice and fairness and free speech and habeas corpus, and we need to fight for those things like our very lives depend on them, because they do. But it also applies to small things, the individual threads that connect each of us to the other, those we know and love and those we merely encounter. Be kind, my friends. I firmly believe that each one of us makes a difference to far more people than we know. Our attitudes matter. Our choices matter. Our choices to be bitter or to be kind to the people in front of us actually matter. One of the greatest gifts of being a minister, of being your minister, is that I get to hear sometimes that I make a difference to you. But I know that every one of you make a difference as well. And so my challenge to you today is this. Think about someone who has made a difference in your life. Maybe someone you see every day, maybe someone you haven't been in touch with for a while. Let them know. Pick up the phone or send a note and tell them what they did for you. Don't wait for the memorial service. Do it now. Do it now. And then move through the world like your actions matter. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect every moment of every day. It doesn't mean you alone have to restore democracy and solve the climate crisis. It does mean that you think about how your actions and how your attitude affect those around you. Smile at the cashier. Chat with the bank teller. Thank your kid's teacher. Think about what difference the strongest love or hate has made. And then try your best to choose love. You will never regret choosing love. Blessed be, and amen.